9.2 million South Africans are said to owe SABC 44 billion rands in TV license fees. SABC is quite a fascinating case. Nearly as horribly operated as this PS Eskom and Fly SAA, this TV license thing is said to be a big deal apparently, because if you spend a long time without paying your TV license, then you might be fined and even spend up to 6 months in prison. SABC itself is said to allegedly owe artists and music producers nearly 100 million rands in royalties, which is quite insane when you consider just how big SABC actually is. We always hear rumors of how greedy SABC is, so it's quite full circle to see that greed come back to haunt them. Cable TV was ruled by this single entity for a long period of time, and this chain was actually brutally demolished by the arrival of DSTV. How did DSTV actually manage to penetrate an industry that the South African government decided to make a monopoly? Well, DSTV has powerful backing. People don't understand that the world of politics and the world of business are more intertwined than you think. DSTV is owned by MultiChoice. MultiChoice is owned by Naspers. Naspers is the most powerful company in Africa. Naspers is to Africa what BlackRock is to the entire world. So Naspers had enough economic power and influence to convince the South African higher-ups to give them a share of the broadcast industry. But little did they know, DSTV would launch an instant takeover. With channels like Disney, Cartoon Network, Disney XD, Supersport, DSTV pulled all of us kids over to it, and then later adults also caught on to the wave. As you all know by now, in our society, you must win over the youth and kids, then the adults will be inclined to also follow behind. There was a time where DSTV didn't have SABC channels. They were in heavy competition with each other. We would go to SABC channels to watch the news, Generations, Rhythm City, Scandal, and all of that. But when we went back to DSTV, we would spend hours upon hours binge watching. DSTV was the peak of viewing pleasure after all. Well, that's until SABC surrendered and handed over the reins to DSTV. And that's when DSTV created somewhat of a monopoly as well and started to raise prices like lunatics and repeating the same material over and over again instead of bringing new and fresh products for us to watch. And so now they are also in a downward spiral, like how SABC has been in a downward spiral. But in the case of DSTV, it's actually because of the arrival of Netflix and streaming as a whole. They are doing damage control using their streaming platform Showmax. Just forget about DSTV getting any better. Their focus is completely on Showmax right now. Naspers clearly aims to create a monopoly through the streaming industry here in South Africa so they can make tons of money when they create their own original content, in the same way that Netflix also came to prominence in the world. Anyway, let's head back to pre-DSTV era. What is SABC? The South African Broadcasting Corporation is the public broadcaster in South Africa and provides 19 radio stations as well as 6 TV stations to the general public. It is one of the largest South African state-owned enterprises. Radio broadcasting in South Africa began in 1923 in South African Railways, but licensed broadcasting began in 1924. The African Broadcast Company was created in 1927 and owned by a wealthy businessman, but on August 1936 the company was sold to the SABC, which was established that same year through an Act of Parliament. Basically, this is when the South African government decided to monopolize broadcasting in the country. SABC took over the African Broadcasting Company's staff and assets. It maintained a state monopoly on radio until the launch in December 1979 of Capital Radio 604 and then Radio 702 in 1980. Although the subscription-funded television service Mnet launched in 1986, the SABC had a monopoly on free-to-air television until the launch of ETV in 1998. Believe me when I say ETV really came in guns blazing. And I literally mean that. While SABC was heavily into pushing soapies, ETV started showing us a lot of movies, especially on Saturdays, when we would see movies by Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Sylvester Stallone. Man, those were the good times. The first time you watched an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie on that not so good ETV quality, let's not forget the Christmas time, the best time for us to watch movies. We tend to forget just how good ETV was when we first found it on our televisions. Although I still believe DSTV was the peak of viewing pleasure, but ETV and SABC in general had its days. Now back to serious business. SABC and politics have a trend of going hand in hand, especially being used by the ruling party as a propaganda machine since way before ANC was the ruling party. During National Party rule from 1948, SABC came under increasing accusations of being biased towards the ruling party. At one time, most of its senior management were members of the Broederbond, the Afrikaner Secret Society, and later from institutions like Stellenbosch University. And you know what we say about the Stellenbosch Mafia over here. The SABC was a radio service until the introduction of television in 1976. There was 3 main SABC radio stations: the English service, later known as Radio South Africa; the Afrikaans service, later known as Radio South Africa and Afrikaans Stereo; and the commercial station Springbok Radio. Programs on the English and Afrikaans services mainly consisted of news, plays such as the Forsyth Saga, Story of an African Farm, and the sermons written and produced in South Africa. Serious talk shows, BBC radio stations such as Soundbox, and light music featuring South African orchestras, arrangers, musicians, and singers. Accomplished musicians such as the pianist and composer Charles Siegel featured on all 3 radio stations regularly on shows like Piano Playtime. On 4 February 1996, 2 years after the ANC came to power, the SABC reorganized its 3 TV channels so as to be more representative of different language groups. This resulted in a downgrading of Afrikaans by reducing its airtime from 50% to 15%, a move that is said to have alienated many Afrikaans speakers. The SABC has since been accused of favoring the ruling ANC party, just as it did with the National Party. Criticism intensified around 2003 to 2005, when it was accused of a wide range of shortcomings, including self-censorship, lack of objectivity, and selective news coverage. Carefully editing the truth so it doesn't tarnish the image of the ruling party. That's what I'd love to call it. On 20 October 2020, SABC and the government were in discussions to get TV and streaming providers in South Africa to collect TV licenses on their behalf. Basically another lucrative cash grab by our beloved ruling party that is noble and honest and definitely doesn't steal state funds at all. On the 27th of March 2021, the SABC has been accused of being a government and ruling party mouthpiece in the lead up to the 2014 South African elections, particularly after it refused to air the campaign adverts of various opposition parties, and again in 2015 when it censored video feed of the 2015 State of the Nation address that portrayed the ANC and President Jacob Zuma in a negative light. In 2015, Minister of Communication Faith Muthambi reinforced the notion that SABC was a state-owned company and therefore subject to control by the Department of Communications and the ruling party. In simple terms, this person was telling us, screw you, ANC won the elections, so they own the state entity and can dictate what gets broadcast. State-owned shouldn't necessarily mean owned by the ruling party. State-owned should mean controlled by the parties represented in parliament. Other political parties should be allowed to air their campaign adverts if they are part of parliament and have paid the required fee. Isn't parliament the very definition of those who govern the state, not just the ruling party? In 2005, the SABC again came under heavy fire from independent media and the public for failing to broadcast footage which Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka was put off stage by members of the ANC Youth League who were showing support for the ex-Deputy President Jacob Zuma. Rival broadcasters ETV publicly accused SABC of biased reporting for failing to show video footage of the humiliated Deputy President Snuki Zikalala. Head of news and ex-ANC spokesperson said that their cameraman had not been present at the meeting, but that claim was later established to be false when ETV footage was released showing an SABC cameraman filming the incident. In such critical cases where the ANC is linked to such matters, one thing always happens. ANC always investigates itself, or the government will investigate itself. Remember the rumors that the South African government was supplying Russia with arms? Even though I support siding with a nation that benefits the growth of our nation, but don't you think those allegations are quite intriguing since the ANC investigated itself? It's like someone reports to you that I slapped him, then I tell you that I will investigate myself and tell you if I really slapped him or not. Of course I'm gonna side with myself. Why would I put myself in trouble? We never even knew all these things, honestly. ANC is the best at propaganda and directing our focus away from things that would tarnish its image even further and even make them lose elections. In 2014, journalists were warned by SABC chairperson Ellen Zandile Shabalala that their phones were being wiretapped by the NIA and reminded them to be loyal to the ANC ruling party. When challenged on the matter, Shabalala insisted that her comments had been taken out of context. The scandal blew up at the same time that the DA accused the SABC of censorship when they stopped airing the television advert that referred to the Nkandla Gate scandal. February 2015, the SABC was also again accused of censoring video and audio feeds of the State of the Nation address in Parliament after the EFF was forcefully ejected by armed undercover policemen after interrupting the president's speech. Footage of the DA walking out in protest over the presence of the armed personnel was also censored. This was in addition to the presence of a signal jamming device that prevented journalists and MPs of being able to use their mobile devices to post news online. The amount of controversy behind SABC is just unbelievable and seemingly doesn't even end. My point in all this is the fact that almost every single year, SABC has been involved in allegations and so much drama, but we never ever heard about all this because the ruling party's image was at stake. Who would want to remove ANC? Everyone in power right now is allegedly benefiting from the ANC one way or another. There is no big independent media company with the SABC kind of reach here in South Africa to spread these things to South Africans. Most voting South Africans probably spend most of their time on SABC and ETV products being manipulated and shown good, down-to-earth ANC politicians, different from the politicians that we know. Reading about how SABC is allegedly being controlled and used as a machine by the ruling party actually scared me. This is some seriously scary stuff that really flies under the radar. This partnership between SABC and eMedia that started in 2021 is a little too late, as I can agree there will be a number of South Africans who still rely on SABC and ETV broadcasting, but with the affordability of streaming on platforms like Netflix and even Showmax right now, everyone will start flocking towards those platforms. Why be shown boring content by SABC before seeing the things that you actually tuned in to watch when you can actually pay less than 200 Rand a month for Showmax or Netflix and get a variety of local and global material at any moment you desire? You don't have to watch your favorites according to someone else's timing and schedule, constantly checking TV slots when you can just scroll on streaming platforms and choose whatever you feel like watching at that moment. Streaming has truly taken this broadcasting battle to another level. At first, SABC was safe when Showmax was viewed as a Netflix ripoff. Since the arrival of dozens of streaming platforms, Showmax has gained a lot of prestige in recent years. Showmax is now being viewed as an alternative to stream local content, just like VIU or VU. SABC is being pummeled to the ground and is still gonna get a little more interesting over time.